Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Sorry we're slightly behind, but I think you probably guessed that I'm about to introduce Joe Brand. So here's Joe Brand. Well, it's surprising if I'd introduce someone else, wouldn't it? Quite a good start.
It would. Who would you like to introduce? She looks very nice.
Yes, that's true. Introduce Boris or anyone like that.
Oh yes, please, Boris.
So, Joe, this has been all round the Excel all day. I think they're doing some advertising campaign for the Excel, but we thought it fitted you, as you have been activating yourself recently in Yorkshire or Liverpool or somewhere. What on earth, other than the good cause, what on earth possessed you to do that?
To walk 135 miles.
Yes, basically.
When obviously I'm not an athletic shape or age, really. Well, it was for Sport Relief, which is an arm of Comic Relief, who I've worked with for years. And I kind of thought that when they do it every 2 years, and every 2 years, the comic that does it is actually someone that's quite young and fit, which excludes a huge percentage of the population. So I thought, first of all, no one's ever failed one, so that'd be quite interesting if I did and no one would mind. And secondly, why not have a go at it and try and encourage women and men of a certain age and weight to kind of get off their arses, really. Yeah.
Did you?
Did I encourage them to? Well, quite a few people have said to me afterwards that they did start doing some form of exercise, going from their chair to the fridge. So that's a start, isn't it? So, you know. So yeah, I don't know.
Have you now started jogging around Dulwich, or?
I haven't started jogging around Dulwich, no. Have you?
No, certainly not. Anyway, so look, normally I suspect, unlike me, you're used to this kind of stuff, so people usually ask you how you get started in comedy and things like that, but we might come back to that because we've got some hitherto unseen archive footage of you. But, before we get there though, I'm more interested in how you started off in mental health.
Right, well, I started off in mental health in 1978. I did a joint social sciences degree with a mental health nurse training between Brunel University and the Wessely Hospital in South East London. And the reason I did that was because I was 21. I was sort of a mature student, and I didn't want to do a purely academic course because I thought it would make my head explode. And also the reason that I did mental health training was because we do have a few people in my family with mental health problems, and I think if you didn't, you might not choose to do that, because over the years the stigma attached and the way in which particularly tabloid newspapers have portrayed mental health issues would certainly put most people off working in it, really.
And I mean, you took to it very quickly, I think would be a fair way of putting it. I mean, as I don't know if people know, but we did work together many years ago in the Emotions Clinic.
He was terrible. No, he wasn't. He was great, but I just wanted to say that.
I know you did, yes. I know it's going to get worse, I just don't think it. So, yeah. But you were already a very, very strong personality when we met, and there's other people in the audience I know who also remember those days.
Is that a euphemism?
No, actually, listen,
it is normally, isn't it? You were a very strong person, a pain in the arse. Well, to me, I think the whole issue of separating out people with mental health problems from people who don't have them is totally wrong. To me, I always assumed a continuum on which some people weren't suffering emotionally and other people were, you know, and you move up and down it. And so I kind of knew a lot of people who'd had mental health issues, whether it's drugs, alcohol, depression, anxiety, whatever. And at some time in our lives, we all suffer something like that, because, for example, if you're bereaved, you know, you go through a period of quite sort of disturbed emotions, don't you? So to me, there wasn't anything scary about it, or weird. It was just, I like people, and I'm a bit of a, what do they call it, a kind of pathological carer, I think, probably, is my problem, which is why I went into a job like that. and I'm sure Freud would have something to say about that. My dad has suffered from depression since he was a teenager,
right.
So me wanting to probably cure my dad.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Just a guess.
Don't ask them anyway.
No, I won't.
But, I mean, you say it wasn't scary, but there were some times, like, certainly I thought it was. We had some quite difficult...
oh yeah, we had a lot of...
We've agreed we can't name them, but
no.
We can remember them. But there were some pretty dodgy incidents.
Yeah, there were. I mean, the emergency clinic was a sort of place. First of all, we covered South East London for Police 136.
Yeah.
And secondly, we had an open door policy. So really anybody that wanted to could just walk in. And with someone who has an acute mental health problem, that is quite a scary prospect because you don't know exactly what you're going to expect, but there will be some violence involved in it. So yes, I mean, there were quite a few occasions where I felt under threat, but I think what mitigated that was having a team of doctors and nurses who knew what they were doing. I mean, if you just put a random section of members of the general public in a place like that, it would be appalling. But, I mean, we had people that were good at the job, that were very reliable, that knew exactly what to do in certain situations. So that, to me, made a huge difference.
Yeah, I'd like to say that nothing has changed, but I'm not entirely sure that would be true. But, and we had a lot of interactions with police as well, and that was fairly common.
We did. I mean, we had some interesting interactions with the police. I mean, I was there, and you were there as well, during the Brixton riots. Yeah. I don't know if you remember that. 82 and 84, I think the two separate ones were. And there was a very poor relationship between the police, and particularly sort of Afro-Caribbean section of the community. And there were a lot of occasions on which, you know, we had a lot of problems. For example, there was a Rastafarian guy that I knew really well. He was someone that we saw regularly, and he was brought in on a police 136. He'd been in the van for about 10 minutes. I went to say hello to him, and he opened his mouth, and all his teeth fell out down his front. And so basically, they'd given him a kicking in the van. And I complained about this, and the upshot of that was that next time we called the police, their normal response time was about 5 minutes. That they took like 40 minutes to get there. So you kind of learn, you know, that there are repercussions of doing this. And I think actually these days, I hope you're going to tell me it is the case, but it's much better than it was. I mean, the police in those days really had no idea how to handle things. I remember one day, for example, they brought in a woman who they'd found wandering in Camberwell. Completely naked, and they brought her in completely naked, handcuffed to police, PC. And he was on the phone to his station saying, "Oh, we're just here, I'll be about half an hour while they decide whether she's a nutter or not." I mean, in full voice to the whole department, which was also an outpatient department. And, you know, I'm appalled by that behaviour, and I would hope that these days there is kind of more sensitivity.
Well,
is there?
Sometimes, but we have I was talking recently with some juniors in the trade, and this really, by recently, last month, and one of them had been on call, not at King's Casualty, but in the London Casualty, and had walked in, the A&E consultant greeted her by saying, here's the pest controller. Well, that's 30 years later. Do you remember the person, the pigeon in the churchyard?
I do. That was a Sunday morning. It's a nice quiet Sunday morning. Everyone had a hangover. Up comes screeching, police siren, and out jump about 6 policemen carrying a man who they'd had a report about in a graveyard. And as they went to get hold of him, he grabbed the pigeon, bit its head off, and shoved the rest of it down his throat. So when they got to us, he'd had it down his throat for a bit, and he was choking to death, basically. So we took him in a room and used a very complex nursing procedure. Someone held him upside down and we hit him on the back. Out of all came. But I did go and say to the policeman in charge and I'm quoting verbatim here, why didn't you actually try and get the pigeon out his throat in the van? And he said, well, we did, love, but he made so much fucking noise we shoved it back in again. So, what can you do in those circumstances? You know,
I mean, you were very reassuring to be around. I do remember that very well.
Because I was solid.
Yes.
The thing was, I was the senior charge nurse. And the problem with that is that if you're the nurse in charge, you're sort of the one that has to tell everyone the bad news. So if you've got to tell someone they're not being admitted, they're not going to get any methadone, they're not going to be transferred to their local hospital, they can't have some money, they can't, you know, whatever it might be that the decision is. It was always me that got kind of wheeled out to tell them. Lucky me. Yeah. And so, you know, you have to develop a way of dealing with people that makes it less likely you're going to be hit. So I kind of hope that I had a reasonable manner, you know, and it didn't always work, but most of the time it did.
And then moving, as they say, swiftly on, but not really. I mean, is that a complete break in what you do now, or do some of those skills come in handy?
Well, I think what came in handy at the beginning was that nothing could be worse in terms of threat or abuse, you know, that you find in a comedy audience. Because, I mean, the thing about comedy audiences and the threat they pose, they very rarely pose a physical threat. So that's something. There's quite a lot of, I mean, that's not, I have actually been hit by a member of the audience, but that was kind of, he kind of got me like that. He didn't really hit me, he just sort of threatened me a bit, and that's so, I thought, well, that's quite mild, you know. So, for me, I didn't have as much fear as other people did. I think a lot of comics that started up, you know, they were kind of sort of very nice people who were quite mild, and they'd been to university and they thought, I'll have a go at this. And then the first person that went, fuck off you, whatever, they just fell apart. Whereas with me, I used to think, I've had much better than that. See, much more imaginative, much more intelligent, can't you do better? So that kind of really helped me in a way, I think. And I mean, for example, I performed at the ICA. I don't know if you know the ICA, it's the Institute of Contemporary Arts. It's a very avant-garde performance space, just near St James's Park. And while I was on stage, I spotted someone that I knew very well, who was a service user, at the back of the audience. He was completely naked, and he had, like, I know, one of those bricky sort of mobile phones that you got in the 80s, and was talking to someone on a planet far away. And normally, you know, if someone walked into a comedy club like that, people would panic and wouldn't know what to do. But because it was the ICA, I think they just assumed he was a member of staff. They just kind of left him there and he just watched the show. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, you know, those kind of, I think, soft universe types. I may have completely got this wrong, but I never see you quite as a kind of Oxford Union Footlights type who must have been around when you started. But did you fit in with that scene as well, or?
The Oxford Union?
Well, that kind of person, or the Oxford Union?
Not really.
No.
I mean, the thing is, actually, when you become a comic, you know, and you get some profile, that the world really opens up to you, and you can sort of do pretty much anything you want. You can go into politics, like Eddie Izzard, if you fancy, or you can present any type of show you want to, or you can do theatre. And so I kind of tried a few things out, you know, and one thing was I did get asked to speak at the Oxford Union in a debate, and it was a debate about feminism, and before you do the debate, you have a dinner where all the people that are kind of presenting a point, and some of the lecturers sit down, and the relatives of those who are starring. And anyway, this woman who sat next to me said, oh, you know, my son Rupert is introducing the debate.
Rupert's up, haven't you?
No, I haven't made Rupert up. Honestly, it's seared onto my brain. Once you hear what Rupert said to me, I could never forget his name. Anyway, so she said, be kind to him. And I said, well, I will if he's kind to me. So anyway, he opened the debate and he said, Jo Brand is obviously a feminist because, and I was thinking, what great academic insight are we going to get here from Rupert? Because she has hairy legs and she doesn't wash her hair. Well, my God. And how long have you been here, Rupert, and been able to come up with that? Yeah. So basically, I'm not going to beat about the bush. I just had him for breakfast.
Literally?
Well, no, because I just think, you jumped up little twat about me like that and talk about something you know nothing about. And he did slightly make me lose my temper, so I did go in probably a bit harder than I should have done. Anyway, his mum was absolutely so full of rage at me afterwards. I'm really surprised she didn't hit me with a handbag, actually. How dare you, anyway.
I think he's still in treatment, actually. So then let's go back. So whilst you were at Morsey, you started out doing gigs.
Yeah.
On your early ones. How did all the beginnings go?
Well, what happened was I started in 1986 and I actually left in 1988. So for all those 2 years, I was working. Yeah, well, I very tentatively tried a few comedy clubs, and my first act ever was a very drunken 5 minutes. They were, and I was worse. I was so nervous I had to wait from 7 o'clock till midnight to go on to do my 5 minutes about Freud, which was far too academic and not really very funny. And I had 7 pints of lager. When I went on stage, some guy just shouted, "Fuck off, you fat cow," at me over and over again until I fucked off, basically. Probably about 3 minutes after I started, so it was a complete disaster. But the advantage of being drunk was that I couldn't remember much about it the next day, so I had another go. I just moved on and gradually kind of built up. And then I was actually asked to audition for Friday Night Live, which was a live comedy show. And, well, being asked to audition is really something, And so I went on that and really things took off after that.
Now, I don't think that was your first. We think we have pictures of your first actual show.
Yeah.
We can put those up in a second. Hopefully.
Was it the Panto?
There we are. Well, can you recognise yourself there as the Panto?
That's actually my normal clothes.
And another one, I think, from this is the Morsey Panto. Was that your normal clothes as well? No.
Look, there's Patsy.
Yeah, there's Patsy, another one. We've had 3. And the final one.
Is that Lewis Appleby?
That was Lewis Appleby, yeah. I don't think you can do hostage-taking scenes anymore. They were thought to be funny at the time. Now, just to level it off a bit, if we can also show you the band, just to be fair. There we are. There's 3 of them are in the audience. One's on stage.
There you are.
I know.
Oh.
Yeah, the worst band. Thank God, there is no known recording of any of this. Thank God. Okay, there we are. I thought it would just be equal opportunity there. All the shirts are good, aren't they? Anyway, good. And Secretary David will be doing your citation because you are going to be our honorary fellow this afternoon. Hopefully, you won't be singing.
No, I hope you will.
Okay. Anyway, so still, let's go back to your career a bit then. I mean, again, having your background in mental health, I wish I could remember now, but I actually wrote it down. But the actor who's just been snogging Taylor Swift, who's that? Thank you. Yeah, that's right. That's the one. I mean, he said that. What did he say? I wrote it down.
He said he preferred me.
Yes, he did. In fact, that was exactly what he said. But actually, what he actually said, he said that most people in showbiz have questionable mental health.
Did he?
He did. Yeah. True statement.
Well, I think yes, probably. That is probably true. quite a few personality disorders. I'm not telling you who.
Oh, God. Honestly, no one's listening. Paying any attention. But again, how does that come out? And do you ever find, again, genuinely, being serious now, your professional skills are occasionally needed, or?
Well, I kind of picked up, well, when I first started, I was the one who dealt with mental health issues, and Harry Hill, having been a GP for a bit, dealt with physical issues. So we would be at Edinburgh and someone would come up to Harry and go, "Oh, my arm really hurts." And Harry would go, "Oh, Christ, not again." And I would deal with people who, a lot of people suffer from anxiety. There were people with depression, just right across the board. I referred a few people for psychotherapy. Yes, I mean, the cliche about comedians is the kind of, the clown face sort of miserable person. To some extent that is true, but I would say that most comedy performers are what you would call other, in the sense that they are just able to look at sort of how ordinary life rumbles on from a kind of unusual perspective. And I would say there's an unusually high number of stand-ups who lost parents when they were very young children. I can think of almost 10 sort of straight off. So, I think certainly there's a lot of kind of different mental health issues going on.
And in your act, do you actually do you think one can do mental health jokes? Do you think one should, or do you think one can?
Well, you see, I think it's like jokes about race as well. I think it's not the fact that you mention it, it's where you stand in relation to that. So I certainly think you can do jokes about mental health, as long as they're not taking the piss out of someone that's suffering from a mental health problem. That's pretty straightforward, And when I started on the circuit, there were a lot of jokes about schizophrenia, for example, which were like completely inaccurate. It was that, that the dual personality thing. And so I know you're probably thinking, God, what an awful sort of pompous woman she is, but I did used to go and have a word with people afterwards and say, can you try not to do that sort of joke, because it's inaccurate and it's prejudiced. And I know people think, oh Christ, Joe's coming, I'm not doing this schizophrenic routine. But I kind of feel that someone has to say that, really.
I think there are many things you could describe, but pompous must be about the least likely, to be honest. It's not what one thinks of. But there would be times when you would actually say, that's a bit out of order.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you still do now? Is it still necessary?
Yeah, I do from time to time. Yeah, absolutely. Well, like, for example, the kind of language, I don't like the word, like, nutter, for example. I mean, and it's not just mental health, I can't bear the word chap either. So if someone uses a word which I think is, diminishes somebody else, I would tend to say something about that in a very nice way, obviously.
Of course, unless they're at the Oxford Union.
Yes, correct. Yes, you're a twat like Ruben.
Just made him have a relapse.
Sorry. Just give him a couple of extra pounds.
Yeah, I mean, language obviously does interest you. I mean, you've got your new sitcom, which is obviously getting very good reviews. I'm just asking, I'm just genuinely curious, you call it Going Forward.
Yes.
Is that is incredibly NHS jargon. Is that deliberate?
Yes.
Oh, it is? Okay, good.
Well, I've always thought that phrase, going forward, it smacks of so many things that annoy me. And one of which is inventing a phrase that you don't really need, because there are plenty of perfectly reasonable alternatives. But also, it's very American to me, I kind of feel like American language is taking over. Like my kids will go into kind of Starbucks or something, go, can I get a coffee? At which point I'd run in and beat them with a stick and say, no, it's can I have a coffee? You know, I mean, I think it's really important that we kind of retain our culture and we don't all use this. We're all going to end up one great big amorphous blob going, can I get a coffee? Like that, you know. And I think it's really important to retain your individuality and also kind of not to use words that one section of the population find offensive.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the one very close to yours, the one I hate, is standing still is not an option. Because actually it's a bloody good option in most of life.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, there are so many of them, aren't there?
Yeah, deep dive, hate that one.
Okay,
Any others you've used in your show, particularly hateful?
Cascading is the word that I like.
Yeah, that's true. That's in the first segment of hell, wasn't it?
Indeed.
Listening exercise is the other one. My door is always open. Because I'm not there, that's why it's always open. That's always a good one. Yeah. And you're saying that someone, I think it was a Guardian, said that you stood halfway between Hattie Jakes and... It's quite nice.
Kate Moss?
No, it wasn't. No, it was actually Samuel Beckett.
Samuel Beckett?
Yes, Samuel Beckett.
Bizarre thing to say. Well, Samuel Beckett's very flattering. Actually, so is Hattie Jakes.
Yeah.
Because I thought she was amazing, Hattie Jakes, yeah.
And you're getting a good reception, I think, for the show, as far as one can tell. Well, how do you know if it's going down well? How do you know?
Well, the only thing really you can rely on is what the critics say. And actually, you know, that's a very personal view, isn't it? That's like asking 10 people you don't know what they thought of the show on telly last night. So either they like you or they don't. So I try not to get hung up on those too much.
But you read them, you must.
I don't, actually.
Really?
I used to, until Gary Bushell, many years ago, he was a Sun critic, said I looked like a hideous old boiler. And I thought, I'm not going to read this stuff anymore. Yeah. And it's not fair, you know, because I would like a forum, well, I could get one, I suppose, to come back at that sort of comment with one of my own. But I haven't got time to do Twitter, so maybe I should.
Well, we did notice you are possibly unique on Twitter. You actually have no followers. After you have thousands of followers, you are following no one. Is that a kind of statement of your life that you just don't do that or you don't need to?
God, that would be great to have no followers.
No, you've got thousands.
The reason I went on Twitter is because there were people impersonating me, and so obviously impersonating means pretending to be you, that's what they were doing. And they were writing things about me as if they were me that I found creepy. Like, there was one person who said they were me, who would do things like, say things like, this weekend I'm taking my children to such and such, and I'm working here and I'm going to be doing this with my husband. And I thought, why would someone do that? It's very odd, really. And so when you sign on to Twitter, if you are the real you, you get a blue tick next to your name, and so people know that you're the genuine one. So I don't actually use Twitter at all, but I just want people that think that they're getting in touch with me. Because a lot of people would write to these characters that weren't me and say, my mother's got leukemia and could you write to her or something, you know. And I wouldn't actually get any of these because it wasn't me, and I felt terrible that people actually believed that, really.
Yeah, okay. Now, you also said recently that you're married. Actually, you said that you were happily married, but your husband isn't.
Yeah.
Well, that was a really line, but not indeed true. So you moved. When I first knew you were living on Herne Hill, you moved about 500 yards by the sound of it, but
yes.
Up a few scale of houses, I suspect.
Well, you know, when I was a student nurse, we used to get the minibus from the Wessely to the Baton Royal through Dulwich Village, and we were all, you know, poverty-stricken student nurses, and we'd press our little noses against the window and think, oh, it would be so lovely to live here. And now I do live there, which is great, because posh people are very snooty, and they don't like talking to people on the telly, so everyone completely ignores me. So, you know, it's fine.
Okay. Well, we have to come to an end on that one, but what is next? What's the next? I presume you've got another big project coming, or?
Well, I'm actually in the middle of making a series for Channel 4 at the moment called Damned, which, and I'm going to get a reputation for this, it's about social workers. It's set in a children's department in a social work office, and Alan Davis is in it. And actually, just as an example of this, because Alan Davis is a very good friend of mine, and he has spoken about this publicly, but he was someone that I spoke to about having therapy, and he eventually did, and I think it really made a difference to his life, because he lost his mum when he was 6, and there were a lot of issues around it which were kind of terrible. So, you know, there's an example. But have you ever seen anything on TV about social work that isn't a documentary?
Claire in the Community.
Is that on telly?
No.
That's on the radio, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is. Yes, it's on the radio. Yeah.
So anyway, so that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Okay. Now my son's a social worker. He'll be very pleased to say that.
Where does he work?
Up in North London.
So like having a chat.
I know, like having a chat. Yeah. How are the kids doing?
Yeah,
they're doing great.
fine.
Joe, we do need to bring an end. It's been great talking to us, obviously. We obviously wish you luck, and I'm going to go and phone Rupert now and check if it's okay. Thank you very much.